It started in October 2023 in the quiet little town of Glenwood, Michigan. Near the center of town, by the main park, there was an old wooden bench. The paint had long since peeled away. One side of the backrest was broken, and most people passed it by without a glance. Occasionally, a teenager might sit there with headphones, or an older man with a paper cup of coffee, but for the most part, the bench was just part of the scenery, weathered and forgotten. But recently, someone had begun to occupy the space beside it. A puppy. Small, shaggy, with fur the color of autumn leaves and eyes too big for his face. He wasn't energetic, didn't bark or beg. He lay curled up near the leg of the bench, and always, without fail, kept an old stuffed bear close under his paw. The toy was worn and stained, one ear missing, the kind that once belonged to a child. He came every day, around the same time, just as the light started to fade and the wind sharpened. He didn't watch the birds or chase leaves. He didn't sniff at passers-by or wag his tail when someone got close. He only looked up when a car rolled past, as if listening for a sound he recognized, and then lowered his head again, as if realizing he had been wrong. At first, people assumed he belonged to someone, that he'd wandered off and would soon be collected. But days passed, and he remained. Someone left out a bowl of water. Someone else brought a handful of dry food. A folded towel appeared near the leg of the bench. He accepted the offerings without reaction, not out of gratitude, but because they helped him stay. Because the bench, the toy, and that exact spot, somehow, they were all he had left. No one saw how he arrived. There were no posters. No one came looking. The shelters had no reports matching his description. It was as if he had just emerged from the memory of someone who never came back. And so, the puppy stayed, wrapped around the silence like it was his only language. Some noticed, some didn't. A few children tried to approach, but their laughter made him retreat. Only the very quiet could sit nearby without scaring him off. One older woman, passing slowly with her cane, paused and looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded to herself, whispered something no one else could hear, and walked on. Later, she told the barista at the cafe, "That puppy doesn't look lost. He looks like he's waiting for someone who never said goodbye." The bench remained mostly empty, except for him, except for the bear, and except for the weight of waiting, which settled into that corner of the park like a shadow that wouldn't lift. People had started leaving food. A plastic bowl appeared beside the bench, sometimes filled with kibble, sometimes with scraps wrapped in napkins. Another bowl for water, often tipped by the wind, was refilled by different hands each day. The puppy never asked, never approached. He waited until they left, then slowly crawled forward to eat, always returning to his place by the stuffed bear. One boy tried to take him once. He must have thought the puppy looked lonely or cold, but as soon as the leash tightened, the puppy pulled back with a sudden, fierce energy. He slipped the collar, darted to the bench, and flung himself next to the toy, panting, trembling. It wasn't fear. It was something closer to panic, as if being pulled away meant losing something that had already been taken once, something he couldn't afford to lose again. To him, the bench wasn't just shelter. It wasn't routine. It was a memory that refused to fade. The scent of someone who used to sit there. The weight of hands that once held him close. And the toy, frayed, dirty, nearly shapeless, was a bridge to that memory. He couldn't explain it, but he felt it. Sarah Blake worked at the town library 2 blocks down. She walked past the park every morning and again in the evening. For weeks, she had seen the puppy curled by the bench, sometimes asleep, sometimes watching the road. She had noticed the toy. She had noticed the way the puppy never played, never barked, never chased anything. One Thursday evening, something made her stop. Maybe it was the way the clouds had gathered low or the way the streetlights flickered on too early. She set down her bag and slowly knelt beside the bench. The puppy didn't flinch. His eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. Then, very deliberately, he stretched out one paw and rested it over the stuffed bear. It was not a gesture of fear or defense. It was more like an offering, or a declaration. "This," he seemed to say, "is all I have left." Sarah didn't speak. She didn't reach out. She only watched. And something passed between them, unspoken, fragile, quiet. The kind of understanding that doesn't need language. The kind that comes only when you've both lost something you can't name. From that evening on, she began bringing books in her bag. She would read nearby, sitting on the grass a few feet from the bench. The puppy never moved closer, but he didn't look away. And the bear, always beneath his paw, remained untouched. Sarah couldn't let it go. Something about the way the puppy pressed himself to that bench each night, the way he guarded the toy like a keepsake from another world, it wouldn't leave her. She began asking around quietly. She spoke to a vendor at the coffee stand near the park, a janitor at the library, an older woman who walked her dog each evening. No one knew much. Everyone had seen the pup. No one knew where he came from. Finally, Sarah posted a photo to a local community forum. "Has anyone seen this puppy? He's always near the park bench with an old stuffed bear. Does anyone know his story?" She didn't expect much. 2 days later, she received a private message. It was from a paramedic named Russ. He wrote that he wasn't sure, but the description struck something in him. There had been an accident not far from the park about 4 months back. A young man driving an old sedan had lost control in the rain. He died at the scene. It was a quiet case. No foul play. Just bad weather and a bad turn. What stuck with Russ, though, was the note the officers had made. There had been signs that a dog had been in the car, a harness on the seat, fur on the blanket. But no dog was ever found. Only a child's toy, an old stuffed bear with a missing ear, was recovered. It had been sitting on the passenger seat. Sarah read the message twice, then a third time. She pulled up the image of the puppy on her phone, sleeping with one paw over the exact same kind of toy. Her throat tightened. It all fit. The age, the timing, the location, the bear. The puppy had been with someone who didn't make it. Someone who had brought that toy into the car as comfort, or maybe for the puppy to cuddle. And when the crash happened, amid the chaos, the lights, the sirens, the people, the dog must have run. Maybe in fear, maybe in shock. Maybe he had been thrown clear and simply wandered, and somehow, days or weeks later, he found his way back to the last place that smelled like safety. The bench, the park. Maybe it was a route they had walked before. Maybe it was just instinct. But he had settled by that bench with the bear, and stayed. He was too young to understand death, too young to know why the car didn't move again, why the door didn't open, why the hand he trusted never reached for him again. But he remembered the scent, the softness of the toy, the sound of footsteps beside his own. He remembered the feeling of being loved, and that was enough to keep him waiting. Sarah sat for a long time with the message on her screen. Outside, the wind tugged the trees bare. Somewhere in the park, the puppy was lying in the shadow of a bench, still waiting for someone who would never return. Not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. And yet, he waited, because he didn't know the difference. Because his kind of love didn't ask questions, it simply stayed. If this story touched your heart, support it. Leave a like, share what you felt in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support is what helps us keep sharing kind and true stories that leave no one untouched. The next morning, Sarah brought a thick, old blanket and carefully laid it near the bench, just beside the toy bear. The puppy didn't move. He glanced at her, then turned his head away, resting his chin on the wood. It stayed that way for 2 days. The blanket gathered leaves. The air grew colder. She didn't try to coax him. She only came, sat nearby, and waited. She read quietly sometimes, her voice soft and steady. She never reached out. On the 3rd day, the puppy slowly rose from his usual spot. His legs were stiff, his movements cautious. He sniffed the blanket, circled once, then laid down directly on it, pressing his side into the warmth. Sarah didn't speak. She only watched, heart tightening around the simple weight of that choice. A few more days passed. He began eating when she was nearby, not beside her, just close enough that he didn't bolt. He watched her with those quiet, too old eyes. And when she reached out a tentative hand, he didn't flinch. Instead, he allowed her fingers to brush the edge of his ear, soft and trembling. It wasn't affection, not yet, but it was something deeper. Trust, quiet, cautious, and fragile. Sarah came every afternoon now, rain or shine. She'd bring fresh water, sometimes a slice of chicken, and always the same calm presence. She never pushed. She just sat, her knees drawn up, the book sometimes unopened in her lap, her eyes meeting his from across the bench. He began to look up when she arrived, not with excitement, not with wagging tail or playful barks, but with recognition, with a silent, steady gaze that said, "You are not him, but you have not left me." In that look, Sarah saw all the things he couldn't say, the loyalty he had buried in the bench, the waiting that still hadn't given up. Then one afternoon the sky darkened early. A cold wind swept in. Rain came suddenly, sharp and fast. Sarah opened her umbrella. The puppy startled, but didn't run. He stood, hesitated, then stepped forward, slowly, step by step, until he sat at her feet, half his body soaked, half tucked beneath the shelter of her umbrella. And then, without a sound, he leaned forward. Gently, he rested his forehead against her knee. His eyes closed. His breath was soft and warm on her jeans. He didn't move, even as the water rose around the edges of the sidewalk, soaking the leaves and turning the path to shallow pools. They sat like that for a long time. No leash, no command, no plan. Just a human and a puppy in the rain, wrapped in the quiet understanding that something had shifted, not because they were ready, but because it was time. Sarah hadn't planned to take him home. The thought lingered at the back of her mind, but she didn't act on it. Something held her back. Maybe it was the fear of misplacing her kindness, of interrupting a loyalty she didn't fully understand. She worried that he wasn't done waiting, that she was just a warm presence passing through, that his gaze, so quiet and anchored, still stretched into a memory stronger than anything she could offer. Then came the day she didn't show up. A fever had crept in overnight. Nothing serious, but enough to keep her indoors, wrapped in blankets, sipping tea she barely tasted. Outside, the sky remained still, clouds heavy with silence. But at the park, the puppy waited. He arrived just before dusk, as he always did. The leaves had turned copper and gold around the bench. The toy lay in its usual spot, and he pressed his nose against it, then curled beside it. He didn't move, not when the breeze picked up, not when the lights clicked on across the street, not even when the cold deepened into night. He stayed. The next morning, Sarah dragged herself out of bed, her throat raw, a scarf around her neck. She drove slowly through quiet streets with her hazard lights blinking. When she pulled up near the park, she saw him immediately, still there, head down, but ears alert. She stepped out of the car, her boots crunching softly over the frosted grass. He looked up. Their eyes met. He didn't run. He didn't hesitate. He stood, took a step, then another, and then he was in front of her, pressing his cold nose against her hand. His breath came in small, warm puffs. And for the first time, he rested his head against her fingers. Not in desperation, not in question, just in peace. She opened the car door. The toy bear sat on the passenger seat, where she had placed it days ago, just in case. The puppy looked at it, then jumped in. He circled once, sat beside it, and didn't move. He didn't bark, didn't shake, didn't watch the road behind. He simply faced forward. The drive was silent. Sarah glanced over at him only once, catching the soft rise and fall of his chest, the slow blink of his eyes. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't rescue. It was something quieter, something like an answer to a question neither of them had spoken aloud. He didn't explore the house right away. He walked in calmly, sniffed the air, padded across the hardwood floor to a rug in the corner, and lay down with the bear between his paws. The room was quiet. Sarah didn't turn on the television. She sat across from him on the floor, still wrapped in her scarf, still fevered. And for the first time in days, she smiled. Because maybe waiting wasn't just something done in the shadow of loss. Maybe it could happen in the light of something new. Maybe, just maybe, home wasn't where someone was lost, but where someone was finally found. Now he had a home, a blanket by the heater, a quiet room that echoed only with peace. Meals came on time, soft footsteps passed without threat, and the walls no longer held uncertainty. Near the front door, Sarah had placed a small wooden shelf. On it, resting carefully as if it were made of something sacred, lay the old toy bear, its ears still torn, fabric still worn thin in the center. The puppy would sometimes walk over and sit beside it. He didn't paw at it or whimper. He didn't try to bring it back to his bed. He simply stared for a while, then closed his eyes and breathed. Long, slow exhales, like a memory leaving his lungs one thread at a time. He didn't forget. He didn't try to. But he also didn't let it weigh him down. Sarah noticed how he changed. The neighbors noticed too. He began to chase leaves in the yard, started barking at squirrels. One morning he even brought Sarah a tennis ball from who knows where and dropped it clumsily by her feet. She laughed, knelt down, and tossed it across the room. And for the first time, he ran, not away, not in fear, but toward something. They called him Lucky now. Fitting, Sarah thought, though she never said the name without a pause. Because she knew luck wasn't always found in rescue. Sometimes it was found in staying, in waiting, in refusing to forget what mattered. Every evening, after the sun dipped low and painted the walls in amber, Lucky would sit by the window. Not in hope, in honor. His gaze would settle on the empty sidewalk, on the darkening sky. Then he'd turn his head, glance at the shelf where the bear quietly watched with stitched eyes, and settle down beside the door. Not because he was expecting anyone, but because part of him always would. And in that small act, in that still, simple ritual, there lived the whole story. A story not just of loss or waiting, but of devotion. Of remembering someone not for how they left, but for what they left behind. A toy, a place, a promise. Because some hearts, no matter how small or scarred, never let go, even when it's safe to, even when they've finally been found.